In focus tonight is India's terse message to China: disengagement must for engagement. That's our in focus, our talking point tonight. India's terse message to China: disengagement must for engagement. And to talk more about that, I'm joined by Mohan Kumar, former senior diplomat, and also Professor Swaran Singh. He teaches at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Thank you, Ambassador Kumar and Professor Singh, for joining us on the show. First to you, Professor Singh. How do you see what transpired at that 3-hour-long meeting between the two foreign ministers?
Very clearly, Amrit, the fact that meeting has taken place after a long gap can be seen as a good sign, because it could open up opportunities now for Indian foreign minister to go to China, and then subsequently maybe other visits could take place. Of course, the immediate context of Wang Yi's visit was a bit complicated. To start with, the mention of Kashmir on OIC summit in Islamabad, which obviously received a lot of sort of criticism from India. Then, of course, he's going to Kabul again, which is makes him the first foreign leader to be hosted by Taliban regime. And that again sends not most comforting kind of signals to India and the region. And finally, of course, the fact that till the very last minute, Beijing decided not to clearly announce the visit, and India reciprocated in that sense. So this uncertainty and a bit of not kind of a good taste as immediate backdrop perhaps slightly undermined what otherwise two very seasoned diplomats, including Indian Foreign Minister and Wang Yi himself, who have known each other for almost decades, I would say, created little bit of limitation where I think largely, other than saying on Ukraine that both sides wish to together push for immediate cessation of hostilities and the beginning of the dialogue, much of the conversation appeared as if they were both simply laying out the respective positions to each other, which both are very familiar. And let me just add very quickly, I think that the tension that China increasingly now has in resolving issues with India is how India's Prime Minister, both in summit meeting with Japanese Prime Minister and another summit meeting with the Australian Prime Minister, which again is an immediate backdrop of this visit of Wang Yi, has clearly said that until border is resolved, until that disengagement takes place, as you're paraphrasing it, no engagement worthwhile can take place. And I think that same thing was underlined by Foreign Minister, and therefore I think a very limited success, I would say, but opening doors for maybe further meetings of both sides happening. Compulsion that China today has is to how to organize BRICS summit, which is preceded usually by about 50 events, including sports people, business people, academics, think tanks, media, and so on. Then, of course, senior level officials and ministers, and finally the summit meeting. China has to open, up India to make sure India joins in all these events, including the summit meeting. So there is, I think, a slightly greater comfort on Indian side, and one is immediately reminded of 2017 Doklam crisis and the Xiamen summit meeting of BRICS, where India again till last 10 days had not clarified if the Prime Minister will go there, and that was an enormous pressure on China to resolve Doklam immediately. So in that sense, I think India's side is little more advantaged at this stage, and Wang Yi should have been much more careful and not mention things that are unpleasant to India to sort of disturb the tone, the positive tone that could have made the visit and conversations much more productive.
Okay. I'm totally out of time. Professor Swaran Singh, one last question to you. How would the Chinese be seeing this? Anshuman was saying they've released a statement where they've, said to put out their stated position that de-escalation, disengagement is an interest of both countries. But, the proof of the pudding really lies in its eating. So, how will the PLA affect that on the border, on the LAC is the question. Do you see any forward movement from the Chinese from after today's meeting on that, or would they stick to their positions?
My assessment, Amrit, is that this disengagement and de-escalation is not going to happen very quickly and very easily.
So they're not going to expedite it.
That seems to be the Chinese new strategy now, of not really pushing for frequent ingressions, but simply showcasing a staying power over a period of time in difficult frontiers. And that is the new strategy, and therefore they will not, even if they make minor adjustments just to placate the relationship and get things going, the forward deployment of People's Liberation Army and People's Armed Police facing India would be a kind of new normal now. If you follow their border law, land border law that they passed late last year, that underlines how China is thinking of this new strategy of staying power being the new kind of focus of how they wish to deal with India. So I don't think it's a major question for PLA, because they're not going to kind of go back to barracks over a period of time. One could also link it to the fact that President Xi Jinping himself is now at a cusp of looking for his third term as party general secretary, and then later, of course, as president of China as well. So in that sense, I think the border disengagement, maybe certain amount of very minor gestures of placating each other,
but no substantial change is going to come about after today's meeting. All right, and on that note, I'll thank both gentlemen, Ambassador Mohan Kumar and Professor Swarn Singh. Thank you very much for joining me on the show and lending us your insights. Thank you.